Welcome back to the arena. This is Squider, and here we start our adventures with the new Strixhaven account. So in this episode, we're going to be looking at the tutorial to start the new Magic the Gathering account. So when starting with a new account, you're starting over from scratch, and as part of that introduction, you're introduced via the tutorial to some of the basic ways of playing Magic the Gathering. So you're guided through that. So I want to go through this same exercise, and as we play the tutorial, I will supplement to the commentary or the directions that you're offered to by the AI that's teaching you to learn the game. Some of the things, some additional things to look out for. And then when we finish the episode, we will see that we've completed the tutorial, completed the quest, and importantly at the end of that, we unlock the rest of the starter decks, which are going to be important going forward in our journey for discovering how to play Magic the Gathering, and particularly free to play. Those starting decks that we're going to unlock towards the end of those episodes will be our starting point for the rest of what we do with playing with and earning gold and achieving the goal of building our collection whilst playing for free. So we will talk about that towards the end of the video, but for now, what you can see here when you start the new account is the game is already referring to some unlock cards you already have. You haven't even started playing anything, but you've got to start somewhere. So the game starts off by giving you a very, very small selection of cards, and we'll be using these cards in the next tutorial lessons and adding to it. So as you'll see, you start with these unlock cards, and it's a mere 5 cards that you start with. And you can see a lot of padlock icons for the various sections taking you through the tutorial, and these will be locked, and we'll see that as we go through the tutorial video. So the starting point of the 5 cards we have are the cards we're going to be using in the very first section to get started. And you can see all these cards from the Magic the Gathering perspective all contain what's referred to as a white mana symbol. We'll see when the video starts that mana is created by lands, and each land of a particular colour creates the mana that we need for playing the spells in the game. So at the starting point, you can see this is our goal in playing the tutorial. We're going to unlock these 5 decks. So you can see the 5 deck boxes which are currently locked inside the chest. And our goal in this opening video is to unlock these new decks, and they will form the basis of the card collection across these decks that we will then use to be playing Magic the Gathering on a free-to-play basis and building our collection with these 5 decks that are going to be unlocked as a starting point. So the first thing is to start playing in this first match, and when that starts, we can see the tutorial will take you through the steps. You have a narrator in terms of the AI, a character referred to as Sparky, and this tutorial character remains in the game. So if you want to just practice playing against an AI, not that the AI plays particularly well, but at least it's an opportunity, if you're still getting used to the game, to take your deck and you can play it against the computer's AI with this character known as Sparky. So she is a guide. She guides us through the tutorial, which is coming up. So we click play and we move into the first tutorial, the very first tutorial, and we will complete this tutorial and unlock some more cards for our collection. So she starts off narrating. She's referring to a battle on the assumption that you're a mage and this is the start of your journey. These first few tutorials are played in what's effectively a limited sort of like battleground. The starting point is to mention that typically in a game of Magic you will start with 20 life, but for the purposes of speeding things up and just demonstrating the basics, you will see that you start with 8 life. Sparky is explaining the land and that lands are needed to cast spells. You'll see tooltips that refer to that fact. There's also an important point to understand about Magic the Gathering. There's a reference here to the cost of casting a spell, and the spells that you're casting are identified on each card with what are referred to as mana symbols. So in this particular card you can see there are 2 mana symbols, and the 2 mana symbols relate to the fact that it needs white mana, and that white mana comes from these 2 planes that we've played. So Magic the Gathering is a turn-by-turn game. So you take a turn, the computer takes a turn, or your opponent takes a turn, and so it goes backwards and forwards. As a general rule, there are exceptions depending on spells that you can play, but as a general rule in Magic, each turn you can play out 1 additional land. So these lands get played onto what's referred to as the battleground. This is where the combat takes place between you on the one side and your opponent on the other side. A bit like a chessboard, but it's referred to as a battleground. So having cast these 2 planes, you effectively have enough mana to cast what is your first Magic the Gathering spell. So what we do is we cast out the Shrine Keeper on our previous turn, and here we see we have another Shrine Keeper. Again, it has the same mana symbol, it's exactly the same card, and now I have 2 copies. As a general rule in Magic, you can normally have up to 4 copies of a single card with the same name, same type. There are again exceptions to the rule, but the general principle is having 4 copies, up to 4 copies of any one particular Magic card in your deck, and therefore you can build a deck with multiple copies of spells that could be useful. In this case, we've got a very basic creature, a 2/2, which is normally referred to in Magic terms as a bear, and that goes back to the very early Magic set in Magic Alpha. Basically a vanilla, what's called a vanilla, no special abilities, 2/2 creature was referred to as a bear, because a bear was the first creature example of that type in the very early game. So we have these 2/2 creatures.
You're going to pay for that.
The tutorial goes on to explain the fact that each creature has a power and toughness rating, and they're the 2 numbers you see, the 2/2. So it's got 2 power and 2 toughness, and we'll see why that's important. So the power is used for attacking. It's the amount of damage you can do to your opponent, and the 2 toughness refers to how much damage that creature can take before it dies. If it's dealt damage such that that's equal to or greater than its toughness, the creature dies and goes to something that's referred to in Magic the Gathering as the graveyard. So cards that are cast, cards that are involved in combat, that leave the battlefield, then go to the graveyard. As we'll find out later on, there are certain cases, certain spells, for example, that can take cards back out of the graveyard, giving you that back into your hand. Your hands also refer to your library, where you have your hand and you draw cards from the library. So that's some of the nomenclature that you would hear from Magic the Gathering. The tutorial is explaining the fact that because one, we're attacking with a creature, it's being blocked by our defender, because they both have 2 power, 2 toughness, they both mutually kill each other in battle. So both those creatures come off the battlefield and go to the graveyard. And that's the animation you see now. So those cards, they disappear from the battlefield, but you'll see on the left-hand side that they remain in the graveyard. So each opponent has a graveyard and spells that disappear from the battlefield appear often in the graveyard. Again, there are exceptions, but let's keep it simple for now. That's the basic principle being explained by the tutorial. We're now in a position where we have to consider the fact that the alternative opponent has brought out a creature which is a lot stronger than the creatures that we currently have on our side of the battlefield. And what's worse, the opponent's made the creature even bigger, so it does not make sense. If we were to block here, all that would happen is that we'd just lose the creatures to no benefit. So in this particular case, it's explaining that we don't block because then our creatures will be lost, and that's a loss of value. So you can see here the computer suggests that you block to prevent that damage just with one of the creatures. So you make 1 block. The good thing about blocking, as you can see here, it prevents the damage. So we didn't take that 8 damage, but we killed the creature. So we now see a sorcery spell example from our side. Because we have that open mana we talked about, we still have the planes because we haven't cast anything. It's the opponent's turn, remember. What we're able to do is to use the spell which says damage to target tapped creature. Tapping in Magic the Gathering is when we play a card to make it known that we've played the card, the card's abilities are used. It's turned sideways, which is referred to as tapping. And that lets us know we've used it for the turn and we can't use it again. So in this case, the opponent has now brought out 2 creatures. We only have 1 on our side in the battlefield. But we now have a spell, a new spell, again from our starting collection, which is going to be allowing us to deal with those 2 creatures sitting across the other side of the battlefield. As you see, the spell being cast, a sorcery spell, is tap those 2 creatures down. Because they're tapped, they can no longer block, so we can swing in and do the last. The opponent was in 1 life, but we had more than enough. We were doing 3 damage, so you see that the opponent is now on -2. So this is really teaching you the mechanics of attack, creatures attack, and creatures can block, and depending on their power and toughness, they can then die and they'll go to the graveyard. You see here we've unlocked some new cards, some similar cards that we've seen, and some new cards. We'll see there's a new Spiritual Guardian, and again we'll see one of the features of that card. So the important thing in Magic the Gathering to get used to is read the cards, and over time there will be a lot of cards that you'll be looking at, but it's important to read the cards so you can see what the card does. Here the computer shows us effectively an animation of it being added to our deck box. This white deck that we're playing with all white spells. So we now have some new cards in that deck, and this is demonstrating Magic the Gathering is about increasing your collection, adding to your collection of cards, and using the cards you've collected to build your own decks. Something we can get onto later in the series. This next tutorial chapter is introducing us to some other features of some of the cards. Normally when you cast a creature out it cannot attack, but there's a special ability called Flash, which means in this case we have a small 1/1 creature that was able to come out and attack us on the same turn. The computer shows us how dangerous that can be over time by being able to cast even with just the 2 mountains. Remember, it cast the first goblin on the first turn, and then it cast another mountain, so it had an extra mana, 2 mana, to cast another 2 goblins, which had cost 1 red mana each. And again, we can see the mana use. In this case, the mountains are casting red mana, which our opponent is using, where we are casting plains, which creates white mana, which we are using. This part of the tutorial, we're showing the advantage of having a stronger creature from a defense that can block and does not get killed in the process because its toughness is tougher than the creature that was blocking, was attacking us. The opponent continues with casting an even bigger creature, so now we have a conundrum to solve. There would be no point in attacking with the 2/2 because it would just be killed by the 3/3, which wouldn't die. So what we want to do instead is just add to what's called the battlefield. As I mentioned, on our side of the battlefield, on our side of the chessboard, if you want that analogy. And again, we're able to cast not just 1 spell, but a multiple spell, 2 spells this turn, because we have 3 mana, and we have the cat that we've cast out, which only costs 1 mana. So we now are in a parity situation. The opponent has 3 creatures, we have 3 creatures. They're not quite equal though, because the opponent still has the biggest creature, because the opponent has a 3/3, which of course, and as you can see, this type of deck is referred to as an aggro deck. Aggro deck's game plan is basically to cast as many creatures as fast as it can and attack with everything on the hope that all the damage coming through, if it's not prevented, is enough to kill the opponent. That's referred to as an aggro strategy. So we're having to defend and try and stay alive whilst this aggressive attack from the red deck. And red decks generally, for this reason, because of their aggro nature being quick, tend to be called a red aggro. And aggro just means fast. They're very fast decks, can put out a lot of creatures very quickly, and if we're unable to defend against it, we could be overrun and killed very quickly. So it's a feature of this type of deck, and it's a type of deck that you'll get used to facing in the battles that you face and the matches that take place in the arena. So again, we're just navigating through this, and the best thing to do is, what we need to do is what's called gang block. We're doing multiple blocks. There are options here about which one we use. We could have used the 2/2, but you see we lost a creature, but the important thing is we killed the bigger 3/3 threat. The opponent now follows up with another spell, a sorcery spell, which he needs to sacrifice that goblin, but it deals 5 damage to us, dealing us quite a bit of damage, but we're still fortunate at this point alive. With no other creatures on the other side of the battlefield, we can usefully attack, taking the opponent down to 10 life.
Where's an army of expendable minions when you need one?
So the opponent is now coming up with another set of creatures. Again, he's cast a creature which at the same time also generates 2 additional of these 1/1. Not the same cards, these are referred to as tokens. but they're still in effect 1/1 creatures that can deal us damage and kill us. So we need to try and react to this, to how we're going to defend. So we have our 2 defenders back, but now we're casting a spell of our own. And again, because we have the available mana for it. And you'll see this spell has referred to what is referred to an ETB effect. ETB is an acronym which means enter the battlefield. So when this particular creature enters the battlefield, as well as it creating the creature representation, it's also gaining us 4 life. It's a special ability of this card, which at the same time of when it comes into the battlefield, it gives us 4 life back, therefore helping us stay alive with this red onslaught. At this point, I decide not to attack. We have time. We know the red mage, as expected, is going to attack with everything, but now we have a defender that can usefully block. In fact, we've got 3 defenders that can usefully block and not die because their toughness is greater than the power of the attacking creatures, which in this case, with the 2 tokens in particular, are only what's called one power, and they have 1 toughness, so the creatures die. So this is a good example of Magic the Gathering. What you're saying is a bit like a game of chess, where you could look at a chessboard, even if you haven't been watching the match, and you can normally think that the player with the most pieces on the chessboard tends to be the one that's winning. It can be similar. It's not always the case, but it can be the case when you look at a Magic the Gathering battle like that we're looking at now. You can look at, by looking at the battlefield, seeing that the opponent has no creatures on the battlefield, that white is ahead, at least in terms of creature count. Now, what red has done, again, the reason for bringing out this bigger creature is because he now has the mana. He now has 5 mountains to cast a much bigger creature. So we continue and cast another Guardian, which gives us more health, life back. Remember this enter the battlefield effect. And again, we're choosing not to block because most of the things we attack with, which is kill us, but what we can do, we can block at this point in time. And because it's only got 3 toughness, as long as we are blocking with a creature that's at least with 3 power, which we have one of the Spirit Guardians that usefully blocks this powerful creature, which otherwise would be doing 7 damage to us. And what we're doing here is, yeah, I'm doing a double block here. I think the computer is wanting us to understand that we can make sure that we're not taking any damage.
So you should probably give up now. A good general knows when they're beat. So you should probably give up now.
So again, with nothing on the opponent's side of the battlefield.
Have mercy on me,
So
please.
with the opponent on 1, and you can see we have 2, 3, 4 creatures. The opponent casts out a surprise attack, and will attack with it.
Well, I'm not surprised.
But fortunately for us,
You're still here? Uh-oh.
we're already at the point. And what I'm doing again, I'm casting the spell. Wasn't really necessary to win, but it's showing you again using this idea, because the creature's tapped, I have a spell that can destroy that tapped creature. And in this case, I'm now dealing more than enough damage to kill the opponent. So again,
It's the pokey bits that hurt the most.
what this is showing, the tutorial is showing you in particular, is the use of creature combat. spells as well. So we're going to get into, with the next few trials we do, and then we have what's referred to as the boss match at the end, where it's a lot more spells going on. There's a lot more
You're
to
a
think
quick
about.
learner.
But
So
the basic
let's try a
principle
more
of
challenging
casting
lesson.
creatures, in some cases casting spells to either remove the opponent's creatures or to make our creatures stronger or to give us life, this enter the battlefield effect, is the idea of what the
He might
tutorial is
look
trying to
like
teach
any
us
other
at this
merfolk,
point.
but his knowledge is boundless. Stay patient and keep an open mind.
Again, this is a different
I will teach you.
lesson. We're playing against a different colour now, so we're now being introduced to the blue, and this is now
Birds
using
fly
islands.
freely,
So as I said, the
unfettered by earthly
basics of
bonds.
Magic the Gathering are lands that are used to create what's called mana, and there are different colours of mana based on different types of land. And here we see islands are creating blue mana, which our opponent is using. And now we see
Everything is connected.
he's casting a spell
You must
on the
understand
actual creature,
air, land,
which makes that
and
creature
sea.
stronger. The creature's also flying, and again, flying is a special ability for this
Bird can
card,
fly over any
meaning
blockers
that
on the ground.
it's in the air effectively, hence it's flying, and that means that things that we have on the ground cannot block it. So it's a good strategy in Magic to try and build spells that your opponent can't really block or react to. That allows you to get the damage through that you need to win the game. So our strategy is to try and end up with more damage, a bigger creature,
You've been paying
so that we
attention.
can race effectively the opponent to see who's able to deal enough damage first. So we're in a race here with the opponent continuing to attack us, but the opponent's only attacking us for 2. We were attacking up until this turn with
Obstacles
3.
may block your path,
Now what
but do
the
not lose
opponent
sight
has
of your
done
true goal.
is cast a creature that's on the
Is
ground,
that
and we're only
crab
attacking on the ground.
a pirate?
Our creature in the ground cannot kill the 0/4 because it's not strong enough. The power of it is not strong enough. So we just cast out another creature, a 3/2 creature. There's no point in attacking because it would just be blocked by the 0/4. So we're better leaving our creature back. The opponent, because he has a flyer, can usefully attack. And now the turn back to us. Now the creature casts another spell, and you'll see what he does with this spell. That 3/2 we cast, he's tied it up, he's cast water on it, and you can see it's been tapped, which means it can't attack,
running out of
it can't
cards.
defend. Meanwhile, we cast a spell that increases the power of our creature. The opponent cannot block because he attacked with the 2/2. He will block with the 0/4, but now we have a big enough creature to kill the 0/4, the blocker effectively. Meanwhile, the opponent attacks again because he's in the air, we can't defend it.
If you keep to the shallows,
But we're in a
you'll never
position
learn
now
the
where we have a
secrets of the
5/6.
Wow.
The
that
opponent now
sounds
casts a spell
deep.
which allows them access to another card and finds another crab. But this time when we attack, the crab will kill it, and we're able to cast the spell that we saw in the last match, this Spiritual Guardian, which gives us the ETB effect of adding 4 life, but also putting a quite powerful 3/4 creature on the battlefield. Meanwhile, the opponent continues to attack with a flyer because we can't do anything with the flyer. The opponent now casts a bigger creature with toughness 6,
big waves,
so even our 5/6 now is no longer able to attack through it. But we now have another spell,
So
and
majestic.
at this point in time, you can see the choices of where you put the spell to make our 5/6 cat big enough. I cast it, and you see it also the ability of that spell that also gives it flying. So not only is it much stronger, but now I don't have to worry about the 4/6 because the 4/6 is a ground creature, where now I have a creature, an 8/9 cat, which is flying in the air. So I attack with that creature, doing a massive 8 damage, leaving the opponent on 4 life. Because it's AI, the opponent attacks with both, but thanks to the health that we've gained back with the Spiritual Guardian, we can survive the hit for 6, and we've got more than enough
Stout as a river.
between the two
Teacher is
creatures
an
we
ocean.
have, on the
The
assumption that the
master
opponent
is
hasn't got anything to deal with them.
Also an ocean.
Wait, what?
So again, you cast another 4/6. We have another Knight's Pledge.
You know what? Mystic I was thinking
You already
that
have the
isn't even
game
a
won.
merfolk.
We made that. I could have added that onto the 3/4, but in this case I choose to do what's called overkill and add it onto our cat. You do have a choice. Sometimes it's better to spread because, of course, from a magic point of view, if the creature had some way like the water knot to tie that down, I've got 3 or 4 cards tied up in the one
It was fun while it
in the
lasted.
one creature, and that tends to be what's like a negative exchange. So I'm losing the exchange because I've cast more cards than the opponent had to deal with the threat. So that brings us on to the concept, which is not really necessarily made clear here, but card advantage, i.e. having the ability to either have more cards with your opponent or cast
Okay.
fewer spells
Almost ready
or
to
fewer
tackle
cards
anyone,
to deal
including
with
whoever roughed you
threats.
up in the first place.
Gives you an advantage because you have more resources, you have more cards to play than your opponent. That's referred to as card advantage.
Watch
We move
her
on to the
every
next
move
tutorial.
and be ready for anything.
Oh, what pretty little thing has wandered into my web? Oh, what pretty little thing
And here we
has
see
wandered into my
our
web?
next colour, black, which is swamp. So we're being introduced to the colours of magic one by one.
Go on, attack.
We saw green initially with the elves, and then we saw red with the goblins,
Go on,
and then we
attack
saw
me.
blue, and now we have black. So we have gone through 4 of the colours of magic so far.
This is my favorite part.
So this is a lesson from the opponent, because it's
This
now
is my favorite.
casting an instant spell, Cruel Cut, which any creature with power 2 or less. Interestingly, the AI chooses to kill the 1/2 and not the Shrine
Might I
Keeper.
get under your skin?
He's baiting us. So now we know that he has these types of spells. Do we attack? Do we not attack? So we can cast out our second, so at least we have 2 creatures now. This can be a difficult decision. This is the thing about decisions in Magic. Do you attack at this point, knowing that your opponent has what's called open mana? He has 3 untapped swamps. But the reality is, if you're not going to be aggressive, those spells remain in the hand, and it gives them a chance to draw into more mana, another swamp with a bigger, more dangerous creature. So quite often, as the saying goes, attack is the best form of defense. But is this introduced to the fact that despite it being our turn, opponent is able to play spells that are referred to as instants, which can be played in their turn as long as they have the mana. That's quite important. So also keep an eye on your opponent's mana, how much mana they have available, how much mana might be coming down. So again, he's casting and now what he's trying to do, talking about card advantage, He's used the fact to sacrifice that creature for the point of drawing
We don't even
more
get a
cards.
hissing.
The idea being, has he got an answer for this?
I've been waiting for this.
So now, in drawing into that card, he now has a much bigger creature than our current 5/5. Fortunately, we have, tutorial shows us we have a trick that we can use. So clearly we don't want to attack, or if we attack,
Careful.
if he is going to
You can't
block,
afford to take another hit
so
like
the
that.
opponent says, at this point in time we could use tactical advantages as an instant, but the tutorial is suggesting that in this case we launch our own surprise when the opponent attacks. He's attacking with 5/5, assuming it's safe because it's more powerful than the 4/4. So we go to block, but we don't want our 4/4 to die. So this is another important thing. Before damage is being dealt, because it's an instant, we can cast our spell. Instants will take place first, pumping our creature up. So what he does, he attacks into a bigger creature that kills his creature. So again, it's a good example of how sophisticated Magic can be in terms of the spells that can be cast and how they're dealt with. Now once again,
You've fallen right into my trap.
with a double block,
Get ready.
you would think we would lose our 4/4, but we can use the same trick, cast this same instant, to increase its power to 6/6, and therefore it kills both the opponent's creatures and survives itself. And again, get used to the fact that it's toughness you need to look at to calculate. If the toughness does not go to 0, your creature will survive.
Your mercy.
So we now have 5 mana, the opponent has 6. We have a spell in hand,
Looks like you've let your guard
so you'll
down.
see what happens now. The creature, so our opponent playing with the mana, he's got a total of 3 creatures in fast succession. And he did that on his end turn, so he's now able to attack.
My turn.
But we have the answer.
Make some blockers.
We have another instant spell, and this particular instance creates 3 1/1 flyers, which are enough equally matching 1 for 1. Takes care of blocking and killing the creatures. So we're on a 4/4,
won't you die?
but we have a final spell, the one we saw earlier, that gives us flying as well, pumps us up for 7, dealing the last damage to kill the creature, our opponent, sorry.
Be in touch.
And with that, we unlock a whole lot of more cards for our white deck. Again, one of the things is get used to the cards that you have, read what the cards do, understand the mana symbols, how much it costs to cast. This becomes important when you're building your own decks, to understand how many cards you can put in, how many spells you're able to cast.
That was some
But we will get into that later in the series.
When we first met, you looked
For
like
now,
an inch of your life.
the computer is just getting used to using the Sparky character.
Who were you
And now
fighting
we
in the
have our
first
final
place, anyway?
boss. So this will be our toughest match. So we can pay attention to all the lessons we've had. Again, some of the
This is a terrible
I
idea.
really didn't expect to see you again.
This is a terrible idea.
animation or the narrative story of the computer is quite clever. Nicol Bolas is a is an infamous, well-known Elder Dragon
I'll
Planeswalker
make a deal with you,
that was
Planeswalker.
been involved in
Defeat
sets of
enemies,
magic
and I'll let you go.
from earlier, and
Lose,
is
and you will
being used
serve
here as the
me
final
for
big boss.
eternity.
He's an arrogant dragon
Fight
that
as if your
believes
life
everybody should
depended.
serve him. So our job is to show him that our magic is powerful enough that we can win and beat him,
Sometimes you need to
and
make a
with
tough
beating
decision.
him, he will let us go. Very nice of him. But it will introduce you as well, so you can see the opponent, Nicol Bolas, as a planeswalker, is actually using more than one colour. Up to now we've seen a player playing one colour, but you'll get to learn that you can build decks with many colours. It has advantages and disadvantages, which we'll get into. But in this point in time, he's now cast, he has a swamp and a mountain, so he's playing black-red, at least. And you'll find out Wallace's colours, he has another colour as well that he
I
uses
do as I
in his deck.
choose
So he's a
with
powerful
what's mine,
deck,
and it is
but
all
all we're
mine.
doing is just keeping up with him. The 2/2 bear. You see his deck relies on removal, so
Everything
his
here exists
objective
or
is saying
perishes at my
he doesn't
will.
want anything that he doesn't want around, so he's using a spell to kill it. It's his powerful planeswalker. Again, we can come out, put a threat on the battlefield. Doesn't match well, it's got more power, but it's only got 2 toughness.
There is nothing else.
So now we see Nicol Bolas drawing into more, and now he's played his third colour, which is blue. Blue, as a colour in Magic, tends to be involved in this thing about card advantage, helping you to draw more cards. At this point in time, because if off the block he would block and I'd lose the 3/2, so
I will let
I'm electing
nothing
not
stand
to
in the way of what
block.
I seek. Not even death.
Nicol Bolas plays this spell now, Rise from the Grave. And from the graveyard he pulls this powerful 4/4 dragon that flies. We have seen flyers before, so we know that we don't have, unless we have a flyer ourselves, we're not able to defend. You can just attack. But I am able to play a spell we've seen before to keep my life up. What I refer to again as the enter the battlefield effect. And I have the 3/4. Again, I'm attacking because the opponent, both creatures, had attacked and therefore were unable to block. Now Nicol Bolas cast what called this double cast. So what that means is the next spell he casts, he's able to cast twice. And you'll see what that does is it removes both our creatures. So you can see as a boss battle,
Whoa!
he has a 4/4 dragon. We currently have an empty board. But now we've drawn into a 1/4 card. Again, because it's not flying, it can't block. Again, he's using, notice how much mana he's using, but look what it's done for him. It's allowed him to fill his hand full of cards. So this thing about card advantage, as far as cards that he's drawn and what's available, all we can do is continue to develop our board. So he has the flyer, and to an extent something we can't deal with. But you can see here,
We just might be able
with
to pull
having
this
our
off.
own card draw, I've got exactly the spell I need. So I can destroy the dragon, because it's attacked and it's tapped. And again, with an empty, unopposed battlefield, he may have had a spell to deal with it, but more often than not, attacking is what's needed. Again, he has a spell killing most of us off,
Hey!
assuming he's going to take the upper hand, particularly has a 6/6 now, so 6/6 causes us a problem potentially, but we have spells to cast out.
So you can prepare for his attack.
Hold back so you can prepare for his attack.
So again, he has a dragon with haste. There's another 4/4. Again, we can't defend it. But we do have this confront the assault. And this creates us enough. And this time they are flyers. So though we know they're going to die, but the important thing here is we're blocking, and blocking just prevents all that damage, 10 damage that would otherwise have been coming to us. So you see the blockers get killed because of the power toughness. And now we continue to bring out creatures. We're still facing 6/4, but we can see here I now draw into quite a big creature. Notice the tactical advantage I still have, and it's again being careful with mana. In this case, 1 mana is going to be enough to save the angel and turn the tides.
Power is beyond that of a god.
So at this point in time I'm not attacking, but I will wait to react in the opponent's turn. He cruel cuts, taking down one of it, and he casts a blocker and another big creature, massing a lot of what's referred to as power in the board. So if you want an idea of what it means, the total power, if you account the total of attacking power that he currently has on the board, it's 16, which is a lot. But again, we're using tactical advantage. You can kill the dragon and we survive.
Come this far,
Admit
don't give up
defeat.
now.
So we're now able to
We've
turn
come this far, don't give up now.
the tables potentially. Those tactical advantages, you'll see they're only casting 1 mana, but they're key spells in this particular match. You're going to find that with your Magic. Don't necessarily think that the big powerful spells like the dragons, etc. are the only cards you need. In some cases, a lowly 1 mana spell can be the type of card that wins you the game. So in this case, we already have the FUD flyer, so I'm casting on the cat. So I have 2 fairly decent, and remember I still have the now I've got access to 2 tactical advantages. So as much as it looks scary, the 6/6 and the 5/3, there's a decision there about, you know, the attack, but if you're attacking, you know you're not killing your opponent,
Let's
then
finish it.
that can be a mistake. So what we did was hold back, knowing that we've got the tactical advantages, and now we have our opponent, Nicol Bolas, attacking in, but with the 2 tactical advantages, and I can now spread them between the 2 creatures. And again, if you think about how close these decisions can be, the cat survived at 1 toughness,
This is
which
it.
was enough. And again, it's because of the power and toughness is 4/5 uneven rather than being like an even number. So we can attack him profitably. He's on 5. He's only left with a 1/5. And in fact, I could have let this go, but as I said, because it's not killing anything, I go on side to block. it could have been left, but of course there's a decision there. But more often than not, it's good practice to, if you have a chance to kill a creature that is attacking profitably, meaning that you're not losing anything, you may as well do that. And then the attack in, and that completes this intro tutorial. So I hope you found that useful. Again, the directions by the computer are fine, but I've given you some other insights, some of the thinking and decision processes that go into playing and deciding when to attack, when to stay back, when to use spells to their advantage. So we successfully unlocked, and our reward is we receive our 5 different decks. The one that we were playing, the white, we've got Aerial Domination, which is flyers, and the other magics that we can use. And we'll be using these decks going forward. One of the things I was going to say is I will try and be showing you the